the balance of power in the Big Ten. Who runs this thing? How many teams are in Tier 1? Is there even a Tier 2? You know, if you watch this show or listen to this show, that's been sort of my my focal point with the Big Ten for a while. Like, yeah, everyone knows who the big boys are. They've been the big boys for a while. Then you go to Tier 2, and it's like maybe Penn State, and then that's it in Tier 2. And it's made the TV product very top-heavy. It's made the overall conference product very top-heavy. So Michigan just won this thing. And Michigan just won a national title. And because Jim Harbaugh left and because a lot of their roster got overturned, a lot of folks are looking at them. You see the win totals here. Colin's showing them to you if you're watching on YouTube at 8.5. And people are saying, okay, well, that means they're kind of in the background. We're talking balance of power, though. Not for me, they're not. This is still Michigan's conference until otherwise noted. Okay, this is not some predictions segment. So if we're talking about who's run things, well, if you've won the thing 3 consecutive years, if you just capped it off with a nice cherry on top that's a national title, how do you put anyone other than them up there? Now, if you ask me who I'm going to pick to win this thing, I'm not picking Michigan to win this conference this year, but that's irrelevant because I didn't pick them last year, and I was wrong. So who really cares who anyone's picking? If we're going off what's happened, if we're going off like paper pop, tangible on this piece of paper results, it's Michigan's conference. And then we start talking about the rest. So then we can go start talking about Ohio State. Because if not for Michigan being in the way, again, all caps, if not for Michigan being in the way, then boom, Ohio State. They're winning the Big Ten last couple of years maybe, and they're in the playoff, and who knows what they're doing. And Ryan Day's probably got a championship trophy on his mantle, conference and otherwise, that he doesn't have right now because they've been in the way. That doesn't mean we have to go 10 or trash mentality. That doesn't mean, oh, Ohio State sucks. They don't. There's quite literally one hurdle that they haven't been able to clear. It's Michigan and then Georgia once they got into the playoffs a couple of years ago. And, I mean, that's trajectory of a ball off a foot. That's the difference in them winning that thing versus losing that thing. So this program's right there with the best of the best. When we're talking about balance of power, you could make the argument that the conference runs through Columbus, but the thing about it is the team from Ann Arbor has gone through them 3 straight years, so I'm not making them take a back seat until it happens on the field. Now, Oregon, here's where it gets interesting. Oregon walks into this conference, and a lot of folks, and I'm putting myself in this crew, a lot of folks are willing to blindly assume that they'll be seated at the head table. I believe that, but I don't believe that because they just started an expansion program and they recruited a lot of good guys, but we haven't seen proof of performance. We've seen them. So, you know, there'll be pushback on this. Well, Dan Lanning went 0-2 against Washington last year. What has Dan Lanning won above and beyond just regular season games? Well, the answer is not much, but he also hasn't been a head coach that long. So I could go back to a lot of guys' tenures, and they didn't do much in their first 2 years, first 3 years. But I did just say what I said about Michigan, and I'm going to say the same thing about Oregon on the other side. I can believe in you all I want to. But there's a lot of newness here, and there's an acclimation period that has to happen. And look, there is, believe it or not, a level of physicality above and beyond what they played in the Pac-12 that does exist in the Big Ten. And the other thing is, here's what will be interesting to watch. Watch the level of quarterback play. You could look at this one of two ways. You could look and say Dylan Gabriel statistically may be the best in this conference this year. I may even agree with you. When you get to play the big boys, when you play in Michigan, when you play in Ohio State, they may play them twice for all I know. When you go play a Georgia or an Alabama or Texas, whoever in the playoffs, is Dylan Gabriel the kind of guy that can take over those games? Because that'll go a long way if we're talking about an individual team this year, but also, you know, for the future prospects of Oregon, if they come into this conference and they end up in the conference title game and they're just falling short against Ohio State, or if they win the thing, that'd be more in line with what a lot of people expect from them. So balance of power, Tier 1 includes Oregon. I think then you start to have an interesting conversation. Penn State's as consistent as can be, and they've consistently not been at the head table, but they haven't been too far behind that. I don't see any reason for that expectation level to change. The only reason it could change would be maybe if Andy Kotelnicki comes in, and that coincides with them just upping their game in terms of explosivity offensively. If that happens, man, then you got a whole new deal on your hands, because then you've got a Penn State that'll still play good defense, but a Penn State that's not afraid to score. You know, not afraid to dent 30 on the scoreboard against you. And I'm talking about in the big games. I'm not talking about running it up on everyone else where you can have a top 20 offense, which, by the way, they had last year. I'm talking about doing it in big games. But what happens to USC? Lincoln Riley's going to be here, I think, tomorrow at Big Ten Media Days. Defensively, How much do they jump? Recruiting-wise, how much do they jump? Right now, it's not good enough. To win this conference, it's not good enough. So they're in the conversation because there's a certain floor that's built in on USC that's well above and beyond, the likes of several other teams we have hanging on this banner just off to my left. But then the Tier 2 conversation, man, Wisconsin, total wild card. Nebraska, total wild card. As it relates to the balance of power here, I mean, Rutgers could sneak around and win 8 or 9 games on you. So the balance of power to me, it's not so much entertaining to talk about the top because that's the same and you just rearrange the deck chairs, if you will. The Tier 2 part, like if Wisconsin all of a sudden does emerge, if Nebraska all of a sudden does emerge, I was talking to some of our CBS production folks, we've got that contract now, that media rights contract. Think about how different the second and third and fourth Big Ten game looks on a given Saturday versus what it used to look like if you've got a solid Tier 2. That's good for everyone, your company. That's good for me and you as just viewers.